Hello, my name is Hamlet Dobbins, and this is Memphis Material, an oral history project chronicling the stories of the visual arts in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis Material is a podcast celebrating the personal histories, the intimate stories, and the studio practices of some of the people who help shape the creative landscape of our city. These unedited interviews are all recorded at the Memphis Listening Lab, an archival gem located in the majestic Crosstown Concourse in beautiful Midtown. The website for Memphis Material was designed by the wonderful Brian Dixon. Now, we don't have sponsors for this project, but if we did, today's interview, the first of two interviews that we did with Mary Jo Karimnia, it would be brought to you by being a model. In this interview, Mary Jo talks about when she was coming up, she didn't see a lot of models for how to navigate the art world with family and children and all the things. I'm so happy to have done this interview with her and with all of the other artists who are also parents. Being a parent isn't something that we really talk about much in academia, but it's been really important to me and, of course, to Mary Jo, and in the lives of a lot of the people that we've talked to. This interview was recorded on May 3rd, 2025. Enjoy the interview. Great. Okay, let's see. Today is Friday, May 2nd. It's right at 11 o'clock. We're in the Memphis Listening Lab as a part of the Memphis Material Oral History Archives with Mary Jo. And Mary Jo, just then I was struck with name anxiety. I think I've always said your last name Karimnia. Is that right?
That's good. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that, wait.
It's,
that's good.
Middle Eastern last names are complicated, right? Because we don't make certain sounds in the U.S. So, I think it's the original pronunciation would be Karimnia.
Okay.
But, my family, my kids, it's kind of evolved to Karimnia since we've been here for a generation.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean that's a good pronunciation. It's Karim, right? That's a name,
okay.
like Karim Abdul-Jabbar, and then the Nia part is like son of. So it's like son of Karim.
Nice.
Is where that name comes from.
Karimnia.
My maiden name was Slosky.
Okay.
Which is a lovely Polish name, and I considered hyphenating for a moment to drive people crazy, but didn't do that.
The switching of the places on the tongue would be too fast, too quick, too hard.
Yeah, my kids could all spell Karimnia by the time they were 2.
All right, so now we're rolling. First question, as we always ask, what's your earliest memory of art?
My earliest memory of art. I spent a lot of summers. I'm from Detroit originally, and I spent a lot of summers in northern Michigan. So my father's family, there's 8 siblings, several of them had cabins up in that area, and eventually my dad got one too. So it was like a lot of cousins running around. And there was one family of cousins that had 5 girls, Linda, Julie, Sharon, Mary, and Elaine. And we hung out a lot. And we used to, there was no TV, no internet. There was, my dad's cabinet didn't have running water. It was, super primitive. So it was a lot of game, playing cards, and drawing. And my cousin Linda was really good at drawing the profile, not just of a face, but of a figure. And so she would draw the people, and the rest of us would draw the clothes. So that was, and we drew a lot of fireworks, which fireworks are easy to draw. So that's probably my drawing origin, maybe.
Now, was that something that other people in your family did? Like you were talking about your cousins, but what about your folks?
No, my father was an insurance salesman. My mother was a secretary until she had me. And they weren't particularly creative. My father was funny. He was he was the third of 8 children, and he was kind of sickly. And I think that he kind of turned into the comedian, as well as sort of he made people feel comfortable. And so that was his special skill. We had there was I remember I have an aunt, my favorite Aunt Liz. She's originally from Germany, and I think she was the one that purchased art for for the two households at one point, and she went to like a starving artist sale back in the 70s, maybe it was the 60s even. And my parents had like big yellow and orange flowers above their bed. This was probably the only original piece of artwork in our house. And then my aunt in her living room had this, it was like a weird landscape that I always imagined Fred Flintstone living in. There was like it was like a rock house or something, like a cave. And I stared at these things a lot. So that was probably, my first introduction to art.
Now, wait, so you had this piece that you're looking at, you're thinking about this Fred Flintstone house landscape.
Yeah.
Have you seen it since?
My aunt still has it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it the way you remembered it? I mean,
yeah,
is it still just as
I
sort
still
of
see
unusual?
Fred Flintstone. Like every time I go to her house in Michigan, Fred's he's in that little room that's behind the window.
No, where did you say it was in Michigan?
Detroit area.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the cabin.
Suburbs. The cabin is in northern Michigan in a little tiny town called Indian River.
Okay.
And we would go there summers, and like it was a situation where like my dad and my uncle would take my aunt, and there were 7, like with my family, I had one sibling, and then my 5 cousins, they would take us up to the cabin and just drop us off. And then the dads would go back down to Detroit to work and come up on weekends. So we literally spent the whole summer there, and we hauled water for a long time. We didn't have a well. We did have electricity. The heat was complicated, so we didn't normally use that unless it got really, really cold. But it was a lovely upbringing.
Now, what kind of work did your dad do?
Insurance. He sold insurance. So not a lot of money. We lived a simple but happy life. And then, this is the sad part of the story. I was really close with all my cousins, and then when I was probably 12 or 13, my parents got divorced. We were close to both families, my dad's family and my mom's family. My dad's family, there were like 50 cousins or something. It was a lot out of, 8 siblings. We were the only one with 2 kids. So that sort of got cut off. And I kind of think I've spent the rest of my life like looking for that community again in some ways. But it served me pretty well.
So now you were talking about how you were good at the profiler? This was your cousin?
This was my cousin Linda. I was so jealous.
So were you also making drawings?
Yeah, some, I guess. I remember in kindergarten, and my mother saved this. I still have it in a box somewhere. It's like a painting of an owl that I did with like this giant head. And I remember the teacher said I had potential. So perhaps that was when I started.
Was there a lot of art in school where you were growing up there in Detroit or
No.
outside of Detroit?
Eventually, when I went into high school, we moved, we were in Detroit proper, and then we moved to the suburbs when I was, I guess, in the 3rd grade. And I was always interested in doing and making. I do remember at my cousin's cabin, there was we called it a sand pit. Like it was a place behind their cabin. Like my uncle would mow the grass to this place, and there was like clay there, and so we would get our wagon or whatever we had and drag it out there and dig up this clay, and make things with it. I remember making a turtle and an ashtray.
The normal stuff for that time period because everybody was smoking.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you were talking about being there in Detroit. Detroit is super world famous for that amazing Detroit Institute of Art. Did that factor into the equation at all?
Eventually, yeah. Not so much when I was a kid. I never went as a kid. When I went into high school, I was fortunate to go to a high school that had like a really good art program, and I actually learned to do animation there. And some of the animations we made won awards, and I was a pet of all the art teachers, which I loved. And so I had a lot of exposure there. When my parents got divorced, I started sort of kind of going out on my own. I lived with my parents. I lived with my mom. But I started working, babysitting, getting my own money. Like when I was 16, I got my license. I bought my own car right away. So I was, both parents were sort of off working. My mom had bipolar disorder. So she was also dealing with like mental illness. So I kind of grew up quickly. But at that point, I started doing things like I discovered the Detroit Institute of Art. It's so funny. This morning on my feed, and I think it was Instagram, came up this old commercial for the Detroit Institute of Arts, it was just this lovely operatic, silly sort of like, you gotta have art, miles and miles and miles of art. And all these people that were like, they played, of course, on Van Gogh, and there's a guy dressed up next to the Van Gogh painting. But it was a really lovely thing. And it was from 1976, so I would have been like 13. And I remember this commercial.
Now, what do you remember about the institution? I mean, because you were saying you started going there when you were in high school.
Yeah.
Kids here at the Brooks, we have our memories. Kids in Chicago, they have their memories. But I'm curious, what were some things that stuck out in your mind in terms of that DIA?
Lots of things. I mean, I loved going there. I had a magical experience there one time. I was there during a solar eclipse that I didn't know was happening. And so I was there with like some friends and some family, and it was the entire colors changed in the museum. And, they have those amazing Diego Rivera murals there, and like going on pilgrimages to see those over and over again. They also have like a lot of great contemporary art. I learned a lot about like ancient art as well. They have like, I think it's like the Ishtar Gates or something there. So yeah, it was amazing. And then in high school, I was lucky enough. There was like a art college called CCS, I think. And I signed up for classes there in the summer. Like I took care of myself, and I just went and did all these things. So my parents I'm like, I'm going to go to art school. And they were like, okay. I was the first one in my family to go to college. So,
now, what kind of work did your mom do?
She was a secretary, okay. Like traditional. Actually, before she was on a good trajectory before she got pregnant with me, which is kind of sad. But she was working for the Ford Motor Company, and she was like an assistant to one of the high executives. But when she got pregnant with me, I mean, this was back in the 60s when she started a show, she had to quit. Yeah, and so she stayed home with us for the most part, and then after my brother was born, she developed bipolar disorder, which I don't know, ruled her life for a little while. Like she eventually got on the right medicines, and then I don't know, she would have episodes once every 10 years or so. Like it was manageable, and basically I was managing that as her child and kind of the oldest sibling.
I mean, during that time, we have so much more in our repertoire now in terms of dealing with it, in terms of talking about it and accepting it, and it's not normality, but normal.
Well, yeah, I know lots of people with
adjacent.
bipolar disorder, and
right.
It's something that's out in the public. Yeah, they didn't know what to do with it then, and I think that was a big part of why my parents divorced. My dad didn't know what to do, and it was really bad at one point until she got on the right medications. And she lived like a happy, prosperous life. She never remarried. I don't think she ever dated again. But, she went on to work. She had one big episode when a new psychiatrist took her off her meds. And then at that point, she was in Detroit and I was here, and I was like, why don't you come live with us? Like, I think you need to. So we moved her down here. And so she spent like the last maybe 12, 13 years here in Memphis, which I'm really grateful for. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really great.
No, you were talking about your house, or you were talking about the cabin and how it had the Flintstones piece in it.
That was my aunt's house.
Your aunt's
house.
house.
She had the Flintstone, yeah.
Now, what about at your place?
Well, there was one big painting over my parents' bed that was like flowers. That was like big yellow and orange flowers, and they were like really textured. And I was pretty fascinated by that. I remember as a kid, like, just going in there and sitting on the bed and looking at it. But that was kind of it.
Now, what about things like, I know, here we are, we're like 2D artists, and so we're talking about, of course, paintings. But
right.
What about, like, were there other made things around there? Like, a lot of times quilts will come into play. A lot of times, ceramics will come into play, or clothing.
My grandmother on my mom's side was a very good seamstress. I learned to knit from her when I was a child, and like our background is Polish. She was 100% Polish, and she used to make the really elaborate costumes for the Polish dancers in Detroit. which was a lovely thing. Although it was also like we weren't allowed in the sewing room very much, yeah, we couldn't touch things. And then she did things like I remember spending time at her house. We were all Catholic. I was raised Catholic, and we made rosaries for a long time. Like that would be the activity. You would go to Grandma's house, sit on the couch, watch Wheel of Fortune, and make these rosaries, which involve like beautiful plastic beads and tying special knots, which I don't know if I could tie that knot anymore, but I made a lot of them. A little bit of rug hooking. I remember doing that. My mom and my grandma and my aunt, my cousin all did ceramics. I didn't participate in that. I was off doing my own thing.
No, just out of curiosity, what form did the ceramics take?
It was back in the day. You would go to the ceramics store and they would have all these pre-made, right? Yeah, these pre-made forms. So I actually have, the Christmas trees with the little lights in them. I have the one that my cousin made, which I love having that. I bring it out every Christmas. But like we had lamps in our bedrooms. I remember my brother had like a sort of a chubby little kid basketball player. I must have had one, but mine was, they were always, because we were girl and boy, it was always like pink and blue things. So I'm sure I had some pink girl. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that you said, I mean, mostly because I don't know anything,
Mm-hmm.
but you said we were Polish.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, in my brain said, I don't know what that means. I mean, I know what being
Yeah,
from
yeah,
Poland
yeah.
means, but I don't know.
Like culturally what that means.
Is there like a cultural difference that you think of?
Well, I mean, I do work now a lot with costumes, in my work, and so this probably goes back to that on some level. That there was my grandmother and my grandfather did speak Polish sometimes. They were both born in the U.S., but like their families had come over, so they were. At least my grandmother was a younger sibling. A bunch of them were like the first out of my 4 grandparents, as far as I know. The grandmothers were like younger children in large families that had come from Poland to the U.S. So my grandma would also have like distant relatives come and stay for a while, things like that. We had Polish food on holidays. Polish music playing, polkas on the big old stereos. I can do a polka.
Now, was this something where the connection with Poland was still really strong? Did they still have a lot of family and friends there?
They had some, it was very much like you think about, like I'm also married to an immigrant. And so, when people from your culture are coming, like the people who were the transplants that are already here, like help them out. And I remember I got really attached to an Uncle Irving who had come from Poland, and Uncle Maciek. And sometimes they would come and stay. We also had family in Chicago, so sometimes they would come and stay in Detroit for a while with my grandmother, and then they would go on to Chicago. And I think I still have relatives I know I have relatives in Chicago still, but we don't see them so much. We're not close.
And so, backtracking a little bit in terms of thinking about the art when you were a kid, and so you were saying that you were taking some Saturday classes at that space.
The CCS. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, what do you remember about those classes?
Oh, it's interesting because I recently kind of pulled out a skill that I learned from there to do some collage work. It's like where back then we were using spray adhesive, but now I'm using double tack because I love double tack. But where you paste the thing on a cutting board and then cut it into like equal size strips, and then kind of like you can interweave 2 different images or shift things around. And I'm really kind of enjoying doing that in my practice right now. It's been like a really lovely palette cleanser between larger pieces, which is really nice. We did that. I remember there was a project where we had to make some kind of a structure with straws, and you were welding them together with a soldering iron. Like, it probably really wasn't great to breathe all that. But we were making like these, the idea was like, how high can you make this thing and make it stable?
Now, was this something that you did for a long time, or was it just sort of a brief?
It was like it was probably my junior year in high school. Yeah, and I mean, it was really fun, and I met a lot of great people, and it was it reinforced like my art knowledge, and that yes, this is a path that I could take, and I was planning to go to college in Detroit. I started going to Wayne State University, and I was already like in a relationship with my now husband then, and he had moved to Texas for, like, he was desperate for work, and a friend had a Sonic drive-in, so he worked at the Sonic, and then he ended up getting a good job at a place called Lufkin Industries where he was doing drafting. And so in the middle of the semester, I was like, I miss you, I'm coming to Texas, and I ran away from home.
No, wait, back up a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about how you met your partner.
We worked at, do you ever hear of the fast food chain called Burger Chef? I think it was mostly up north, it's like Burger King, McDonald's, things like that. And I took a summer job at this burger shop. I think I was one of the very first, like, salad ladies in a fast food restaurant. Like, it was a new concept in fast food, like a salad bar. And I have a horrible scar, I can't see anymore, on my thumb, where I really cut myself really badly when I was chopping lettuce. But I loved doing the salad bar. Like, my salad bar was gorgeous. All the spoons faced the same direction, and yeah. And he was working in the back. We didn't actually start dating until we both left, but he's my husband Omid is 6 years older than I am. So I was working there. I actually lied to get the job. It was so ridiculous. I was 15 and you had to be 16 and you had to get permission from your high school. And so I went and got this form, and I mean, it wasn't even the same color pen. I turned like a 3 instead of 63 into 62. Like, it was so obvious that I did this, but they hired me anyway. So it was, and my husband is from Iran, which back then it was also like the middle of the hostage crisis, which is when people figured out where Iran was, and it was this horrible, awful political thing that definitely, like, affected him, because he was here going to college and ended up staying in the U.S. because he didn't want to go into the Army. A lot of his generation, the men of his generation, were killed in the Army, and they had mandatory service there. So he stayed, and we eventually got married.
No, wait, what brought him here? What brought him
School.
here? Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was here to go to architecture school. I mean, he ended up not doing architecture. He's more like doing engineering work right now, computer engineering. But yeah, it was, something. It was, when he was in Iran, it was very much like the U.S. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The Shah was in power. And then when he came to the U.S., the revolution happened, and then it was all, everything was very religious. He had a younger sister who was like 12, 13 years younger than him that really ended up being raised in a completely different atmosphere in Iran than the way that he was raised. And I don't know, I found that kind of fascinating, how these things in the world can affect you. He was planning to get his degree and go back. And after the revolution, he didn't want to go back. And his parents were happy that he was here because he was safe. And we have a good life together, so it turned out.
And he was going to school at Wayne State?
He was going to Lawrence Institute of Technology, which was actually right down the street from the Burger Chef.
Okay.
When he couldn't, at one point they were like, his parents from Iran, they had lots of sanctions on Iran and all this because they had these hostages that they kept for over a year, I believe. And so they were all these different things, like his parents weren't allowed to send money. So he had to find a way to survive. And so he started working at the Burger Chef, which is how we met. And I was just trying to survive as a teenager that had a car payment.
Right. And so, now, just to back up a little tiny bit, in terms of thinking about art in high school, like, what kind of a kid were you in high school? Was the art room like the place where it was sort of like a place where there were cool kids? Was it something where you were already cool? What was your life like in high school?
I don't know if I was cool in high school or not. I have pink hair, so now I'm cool. But back then, I'm not so sure. I mean, I was definitely like in the art crowd, and I took as many art classes as I possibly could. And I got close with the teachers. I mean, I was close with students too. But I remember, I think I was like weirdly braggy for a moment because I don't think I felt like so at home. I went to a Catholic school until high school. And so there wasn't a lot of art there. But I was already making art. Like I knew I wanted to pursue this. And so I was really happy when my parents couldn't afford to send me there anymore. So I went to the public high school because the Catholic high schools in Detroit were all segregated. I didn't want to go with all girls either. So I started taking art classes and like to get myself in or whatever. I remember being like, I don't know, we were working with kneaded erasers or something. And I was like, I have one of these at home. I have one of these. I have one of these. And somebody called me out. I was so embarrassed. But
Now, what kind of things were you looking at? I mean, partly, I know the high school experience for the most part is just like, this is how you hold this thing. This is how you do this thing. Here are a couple of tricks. A lot of kids aren't really shown things, but were you seeing things when you were there in the high school?
This was a really progressive high school. Like I'm really grateful. There was a teacher that taught commercial art. So of course this was before computers. So we were doing like magazine layouts. Like this is how I learned to use an X-Acto knife. And then we had another instructor that was really into film. So we were making animations. We made, I did like a personal little tiny animation, and we entered all these animations into the Canadian Film Festival. And our class animation that we did all together won an award. And that was, what's the man, the man that's standing like this? Is that a Michelangelo drawing? Yeah,
sure, the Vitruvian Man?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had all traced this. Like everyone got an image of this, and the video was that you had to animate from that. Like we did like cell drawings, and then you had to animate back to that, and then the next person's. So it was like maybe 10 or 12 different, and I don't know, I think my man grew wings and flew away and came back or something. And then I did this other crazy, it was just a really short animation that was not a ton of drawings, that was called something like Schlub, which was Polish for wedding. And it was all these Polish sausages that were like dancing at the wedding party. So it was all these little dancing sausages. And then like a butcher with a big fat knife comes to the door. So all the sausages run away. And this won some kind of an award because it was funny. So, like I had skills. There was also like a really good photography department. So I was doing photography, and they had a dark room, so we were developing our own photos. I was dating my husband at that point, who was very poor, living in downtown Detroit in like a falling down place, and we would go explore like empty buildings and take photos in them. So you were saying that you eventually went to Wayne State after you were done with school.
I can't remember. Is that an institution where you have to like submit a portfolio? Is it like a well-known art school? I know
that's a good question. Like I don't think I had to submit a portfolio at that point. I'm not sure how I got in.
Mm-hmm. I think my only connection to Wayne State was that my friend Peter Williams taught there for a long time. But I think that might be the only thing I really know about it.
I went there only for about half a semester, but I have like really great memories from some of the classes I took. There was one design class that did this series of, we were illustrating opposites in black and white. And I must have done like 100 of these things, and I was really into it. And then when I decided to run away, I had a friend that was at Wayne State that we were friends, that was a dude, and he started getting sort of romantic towards me, and I was like this isn't going to work. Like he didn't know Omid. He knew that I had Omid, but that sort of pushed me a little bit. Like I got to get out of this situation, and I really want to be with this other person. And he's setting himself off down there. Like and of course I called him up, and he was like, okay.
So now you were saying he was down in Houston?
He was in a small town called Lufkin.
Okay.
Outside of Houston. It's like a couple of hours from Houston in East Texas. I had been there visiting.
I love how only in Texas can something be like it's just outside of Houston, like,
Yes.
like 2 hours, you know.
So, okay, here's a confession. All right. So I was raised in Detroit. I was a city girl, and I'm there were so many ways that I was culture shocked moving to this little town in Texas. There were things that I really didn't expect, and I was surprised that the cities weren't all connected. You know, that they were all like so far apart. Because in Detroit, it's like, you know, it's a city and then there's a city next to it. And then like you can drive for hours and there's just cities. Yeah. And so that was a strange I have to say, I didn't love it there. We were there for 9 years. And eventually I was like, I just, you know, like, honey, we gotta move. And so we did.
No, I mean, thinking about that, I mean, you were saying you were there for 9 years. I would imagine, P.S. no shade about small towns in Texas in the 1970s, but I would imagine that might be a difficult place for an Iranian immigrant.
I know, you would think that. And
No?
yeah, it wasn't bad. He he got into the soccer scene there, and then the job that he was doing, it was an interesting situation. So he started off, his friend who had this sonic drive-in said, come down, at the very least you can work for me, but there's this place called Lufkin Industries where they're always hiring. So Lufkin Industries make gearboxes and like the oil well, those horse things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so he went there and applied for a job, and he was at first sweeping metal shavings from the floor. So like that was his job. It was like in the factory. And then he heard that they were looking for draftsmen, and he had this experience as a drafter. He was a very good drafter because he went to architecture school. So he went and talked to them, and I think they kind of side-eyed him and said, well, we'll try you out for 2 weeks. And he stayed for 9 years, and they had a lot of respect for him, and it was a tight community, and he made a lot of good friends there. I think he ended up being more comfortable there than I was on some level. So there was Lufkin, and then after I left Wayne State, there was a college called Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, which was about 30 minutes away. So I set my eyes to go to school there, and I went there, and I talked them into letting me register even before like the transfer material. I didn't submit a portfolio. I think I showed them some things, and they let me in. And so that's where I ended up getting my degree. I actually feel like it's a very similar school to University of Memphis, you know, a big sprawling canvas. I think it was a similar size. Like I had a lot of really good experiences there. But I also, like, you know, it was in the 80s, so we were just using the standard Gardner art history textbook. I felt like my art history education there was really lacking. And then I also felt like they didn't really prepare me for, like, I applied to grad schools after that. Even though I was like an A student that graduated second in my class, I didn't get into any of the grad schools. I was doing a lot of figure drawing. Like, for me, that was the strongest department. And I got attached to a particular teacher that I really liked that was very, Don Beeson, very open and very, you know, like, and in some ways, he was very progressive, especially for the times. He would do things like, all right, you come to the class. If you come to class at all, I'm going to give you an A. If you don't come at all, I'm going to fail you. And I liked this. Like, I worked really hard, but I liked the idea that I wasn't necessarily working to get a higher grade. And I loved that. And I did a ton of figure drawing, a lot of intuitive work, like really quick figure drawing, and got a lot of good feedback for it. And I continued to do that for a while after I left. But I was there, you know, like I got my degree, and then I looked for a job in the arts and couldn't find anything. So I ended up working and I didn't get into any of the grad schools. I was hoping that would be my way out of Lufkin. So then I was sad for a while, but then I got a job.
Okay, hang on. But before we get out of that, I was sad for a while.
Yeah.
So to back up a little bit, thinking about college, I mean, that even going from Detroit to this smaller place in Texas, I would imagine that and I know that you were still sort of stuck with gardeners. I mean, there should be like a separate podcast about
no kidding.
recovering gardener art through the
Art through the ages.
Yeah, art through the ages, yeah.
I actually threw it away at one point, which made me feel so good.
No, but thinking about that, what kinds of things were you seeing? I mean, for me, one of the great things about going to college was that was when I really began to see things, as limited as it was, but I still was able to see things.
You went in Iowa, right?
Well, I went to undergrad here.
You went to undergrad here, okay, and then you went to graduate school in Iowa. Yeah, I mean, there was more exposure. You know, we were going to, and again, I made the effort to go to, like, Houston, to go to the museums there. Saw some great work there. One time there was a field trip on a bus where I actually got left in Houston. And I had to call my husband to, like, come and get me. It was nuts. It was a really stupid situation. It was not my fault. But, yeah, and there was, I really wanted to go to school for animation. Like, that was kind of my goal after the good experience I had in high school. But when I got to this college, like, they really didn't have a good animation department. So I started taking other classes. I skipped design. I had, like, all this strong design work, which maybe was a mistake. I probably would have really enjoyed the design classes there. Mary McClary was a teacher, and like, her work is really interesting. I took jewelry there, but then, like, this group that was sort of forming around the life drawing stuff and painting. I was doing painting back then, and SFA is where I met my best friend Kiko Gonzalez. So, and we own the Studiohouse together here in Memphis. So we have had a friendship ever since college, which I really cherish.
Now, you were talking about taking painting classes. I mean, that was different from high school. You had not had painting in high school?
Correct.
No?
Yeah, my first paintings, actually, it's kind of funny because I tried to fit myself into this painting mold for a long time. And drawing was sort of along with that. I like drawing, but it took me a long time to realize that I really didn't like painting. Like, I didn't like the act of painting. And I felt like, everyone was pushed in that direction.
What do you think it was?
I used to think that it was like I didn't like reloading the brush.
It slowed you down?
Yeah, it slowed me down. And, I was doing all these intuitive things. And with a pencil or whatever, charcoal, you can just, like, keep going. You just keep going. You just make all these fabulous lines. And I tried to do that with a paint. And I love painting, like, as a medium. And looking at paintings, I really love paintings. Kiko is an amazing painter, and I just love, like, getting the ringside seat to his process all the time. I admire your painting. There's so many good painters. But it was a big revolution for me to realize that this was not the medium for me. I do think it is something that is somewhat, it was like, it was a masculine thing from the past, right? That is pushed upon everyone. And I wasn't free until I started using the craft materials that I was more comfortable with as a person that presents as a woman in our culture. And like, when that happened, then I think my work went somewhere.
That's interesting. I mean, do you think you were aware of that? I mean, of course, we're all very enlightened now that we are ancient. But do you think that you were aware of that machismo sort of connections to
absolutely,
painting?
Absolutely not. I look back on my, like, my college years, things like that. Like, I was trying to be with the dudes. They were the ones that were getting the attention, and they were doing all the work. Like, I wanted to hang out with Kiko. There were other, like, men that were doing painting, that were doing all these things, and drinking beer and doing all the stuff. And so, like, I was tough. I could make my own stretcher bars and, like, do all these things. And I did, like, a big metal casting thing at one point that I was kind of, I don't know, like, I was a teacher's pet. on some level. So I was, but part of that was because I was trying to be a dude. Yeah.
No, I mean, thinking about Keiko, what was it that made you guys such good friends, do you think?
That's a good question. I don't know, because I also, I don't, why do we like each other? This should be easier.
Well, I mean, for me, like, when I'm thinking about my college people, and there weren't very many people that I was super close with in college. I mean, most of it was kind of an admiration thing. I mean, the people that I sort of became friends with were people that I thought were really great makers, and then there was also kind of like just like a personality click that happened with some of them.
Yeah, it might have been that we were sort of in this clique together, and then it got to the point like during this time I was setting up a household with Omid, and I was learning how to cook Persian food. And so sometimes I would take Persian food to school, and sometimes I would invite Kiko for dinner. It was because he didn't have a car and it was 30 minutes. So he would come home with me. We would hang out, eat Persian food, drink beer. I definitely admired his work. I don't know if he admired my work at that time. It was, I don't know, like you sit around with art students and you philosophize and talk about things. I wasn't like a super heavy partier necessarily. He was. He was in a fraternity, which is kind of a crazy thing. But we really just liked each other. I don't know, we clicked somehow. And it was a friendship. Like I had this like long-term romantic relationship with someone, and he had different long-term people that he was dating. So maybe without that pressure, that was kind of a nice friendship, and it's still that way.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were talking about the things that you were making when you were in college.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about what they were about, or how you were thinking about art in that process.
I was coming at it from a very intuitive point of view. So I really enjoyed the figure drawing thing, like setting up the figure, like doing really quick sketches. And I felt like when I was drawing intuitively and sort of like not thinking about it, like when I was really just sort of on automatic, that the drawings were better. And so this was something that I tried to cultivate. And I did. And I feel like even though my practice right now is like really far from that, it is still a way that I make decisions within the work. And I feel like that intuitive place, like it feels backwards. When I talk to a lot of artists about this, a lot of artists will, I don't know, I'm going to make a painting about, I don't know, I'm looking here, like screaming cats or whatever. Like I could never do that. I just sort of make an intuitive decision about what I'm going to make, and then like the meaning of it sort of comes afterward. So, and I learned after a while that the work like does have deep meaning in it, and I think that we're all people in the world, right? I learn about politics, I pay attention to all of the things that are going on, and I think that you can't help but have those things in your work, whether you put them there deliberately or not. And I kind of feel like my process in doing that and putting deep meaning in the work, it makes it slow when it's intuitive, to really embed all these things. I also think that it's intuitive, but it's also sort of a trained intuition. When I was doing drawings, I was doing them over and over and over again, these figures. Like I knew the proportions, I knew I knew how to make these things automatically, but that sort of happened over time by doing it again and again and again. So I still do that. Even though I'm working with like vintage postcards right now, it's a very intuitive process to choose a postcard to make a thing. And then sometimes the meaning of it comes to me afterwards, sometimes through my own contemplation or someone else's observation of what's in there. I have a large series of prints that I did, steamroller prints at 5-in-1, and they're very figurative, right? They're like these big figures. At that point, I was really exploring how costuming affects people wearing costumes. My youngest son was going to cosplay conventions, and he was dressing up, and I was watching all his friends. He wanted to go there when he was young, and I was like, you can go, but I don't know those people. Like, I'm not dropping you off. So I was the mom with the van that would take all the homeschooling kids there, and I would sit all weekend long or go get them sushi. And so I remember sitting in a hallway, that really awful, wonderful carpeting that they have. That's like one of my favorite things. And that's when I developed a passion for it, because I was sitting on the ground watching all these people in crazy costumes, didn't know most of the characters, walking by, and I started this series of photographing, like the legs. And so this became a part of my practice. And so, okay, back to the prints. So I was doing these things, and my son, who turned out to be transgender, was actually kind of like figuring that out through costume, doing these things, and I watched his friends go through things like that too. So the images that I was making were about this change during adolescence, right? And I was printing them on vintage sheets. And I had a studio at the Roswell Warehouse with Mark Nowell. I was there for something like 5 years. I loved being there. And Mark was great, still is great. And I had a bunch of these prints hanging up in the little gallery area there. And he was like, oh, I get it. Like, the vintage sheets have to do with loss of innocence. And I was like, yeah. But it was something that I had, like a move I had made that wasn't conscious, that he pointed out to me, but was absolutely in the work. So.
Now, to backtrack a little bit, thinking about college, who were some of the artists that you were looking at, that you were liking, that you felt like might be on your softball team?
That's a good question. I mean, I think like the abstract expressionists, like that's who all the dudes admired, yeah, just those guys.
Well, I mean,
all the men.
so for me, I hate Clifford still. And so, but I love Guston. So let's open that up a little bit. Yeah. Who did you like?
I was artists that I still sort of admire, like the Rothko Chapel is in Houston, and I've been there a number of times. I was definitely looking at that, and the people that were around me. Wow, I should have a better list of who was affecting me at this moment. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed art history a lot, even though it was, subpar when we were learning. Yeah, I mean, like I admired Picasso, which right now I'm like, oh, God, he's like a problematic dude. Like, nah, don't admire him. Like,
well, I mean, thinking about that, I mean, to me, one of the things that's real interesting is that, they're like, I feel like in the same way that we, as artists, find people that we like, sometimes the people that we find at the beginning are people that are easy to access.
Yes, right. That's Picasso. Yeah, Picasso, Van Gogh.
And they're the ones that are out there, and they have all the books, and they have all the slides, and they're in all of the, all of the publications. And then the other stuff tends to come a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like I went to art school. I got this degree. We were still in Lufkin for a while. I started having kids. And then as my kids grew up, I was like kind of like I was keeping my toe in a lot of things, but emerging back into the art world. And that was the point at which I realized that my personal art education was like the history part was really lacking, and then I hadn't been exposed to a lot of things. So I was here in Memphis learning about stuff, and I started volunteering for the Powerhouse. And so, like I was learning a lot. I was exposed to Rashid Johnson there. Like they were doing a film series in the basement that was really amazing. The work is really challenging. I was really interested. I had never really seen or understood a lot of video work. And I was sort of determined to, like, what is this? Why should I like it? And I started looking at some video work, and I was like, I really didn't like it. And I was like, but I know this is important. So I just kept after it. And eventually I began to see some video that I really liked, that I understood. I still get kind of resentful when I feel like I devote myself to, say, a video piece that's 20 minutes long or something. And I've spent like this 20 minutes looking at this thing that, really is not speaking to me. There was one piece, and I should look up who the artist was. Maybe you know, because I don't know. I saw a video, and it may have been at the Powerhouse. That was it was a very short video of, they were like two people on this sort of swing that were trading places, and it was like a black woman in like a colonial dress, and then she would go down on this thing, and then like a white man in a colonial outfit would come up, and it was like this, they just kept spinning like around and around, and this really spoke to me. So that sort of opened the doors to me for video art and understanding like what I thought was good video art, and then I sort of sought these things out. Took a trip to New York.
Hang on, I'm gonna back you up a little bit. Okay, so you're in Lufkin?
Yes.
Lufkin. Mm-hmm. So you're in Lufkin. You guys are there for like 7 years, 9 years?
9 years,
we
were there for 9 years.
Okay, so you finish your education there, and then you said you started having kids.
Started having kids,
How old were you when you started having kiddos?
25.
Okay.
And I was still like, I had a drawing practice, I was drawing my kids.
Okay.
I got really involved in, I worked for an eye doctor for a couple of years, like before I had kids. And then when my oldest, Max, was born, they were like, are you going to come back? And I was like, I don't know. And then I started, I decided to nurse him, and I got into the nursing community there. La Leche League is a group that helps breastfeeding moms, and so I got really involved with La Leche League in that area. I eventually became a La Leche League counselor, and I did that for, I don't know, a long time, 10, 15 years, and that helped me get into other communities that we then moved to. So from Lufkin, we moved to Dallas, and I had my second kid there. That's where I became a La Leche League leader. And then we were transferred from there. I think my husband's company was bought out by another company that transferred us to Red Wing, Minnesota, where my third child was born. And the La Leche League is, it's a lot of moms that, it's the granola folks and cloth diapers and, extended nursing. And a lot of people within the La Leche League world homeschooled their kids. And so this is what I ended up doing. I actually, we were in Minnesota. My oldest, Max, was just getting to be about the age where he was going to start school. He had been in like a Montessori preschool in Minnesota, which we really liked. And we had been exploring, like there was another really cool school there that was like a 45-minute drive that I was going to take him to. And then the company got bought again, and they moved us to Memphis. Yeah, and then I came here, and it was time for Max to start school. And like I looked at the schools here. We couldn't afford to put him in private school at that point. And I was like, I knew people that homeschooled, and I had sort of been exploring this and hanging out with people that homeschooled in Minnesota. And I talked to my husband, and I was like, let's try this for a couple of years. And then we just never looked back.
Now, what year was this that you guys came to Memphis?
96, maybe. Let's see, is that right? Alex was born in 92. Yeah, probably 95, 96.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so in that time, you were saying that, you were drawing your kids. Mm-hmm. How did the practice, I know that is a very hard time to maintain any kind of like consistent practice, especially with 3 kiddos. Mm. And so what were some things that you were kind of thinking about and working with in the studio, or what form did the studio take? And by studio, I just mean the space of making. It
was a sketchbook, and I was happy to do that. I also loved that was a part of my motivation to homeschool. It's like my first kid is old enough to use scissors now, and I'm going to send him to this place where they don't really care about that. Like everyone, they're like, he's going to get lost in there. Like, I want to play with him. And so, doing a lot of crafts things with the kids, I don't know, things like dyeing Easter eggs. It was always a big production. We always leaned into those things. I just kind of kept drawing in sketchbooks. And yeah, and I still have sketchbook practice sometimes.
Well, I mean, thinking about that, and you were drawing in the sketchbook. Like, what kinds of things were you drawing? What kind of things were you thinking about?
It was still an extension from like my intuitive figure drawing. I held on to that for like a good long time. And here in Memphis, I continue to do that as well. Heidi Knockenhauer, who was like been a model in Memphis for a long time. Like I was working with her a lot when I moved here, and like any time that there was a sketch group, as my kids got older, I would try to go to it. So I continued this. So, and then, like a lot of craft things. After I had kids and was doing homeschooling, we had various groups that we would do. I founded a homeschool support group, so I was like in charge of things. And then we also had this thing called Friday Group, which was a small group of families that are all still friends today. There were like 4 or 5 families. Sometimes one family would come and go. But this core family, there was Mary Kourouboros was in there. She's a local artist as well. Margaret Meyer, taught the kids English. Diana Schmid, who used to be an attorney in Memphis, would teach civics. And like Mary and I would do art with the kids. So we did all kinds of things. And it was like for the month of February, everyone would come to my house. All the parents, all the kids. It was like this, the kids were, like we all kept having kids. So it was like, there was the older group, the middle group, and the babies. And so all those kids were involved with whatever we were doing on whatever level they could. And I learned how to knit. I learned how to quilt in this group. I learned how to tie-dye. Which are skills I still drag out sometimes. So, I was doing all of these sort of craft-based things. I think I was somewhat resentful at that time that I didn't have time for my art, but, was hopeful that it would come back. I also didn't have good models for like being a mother and an artist at that moment. It's I hope that I went on to be a model in some way, but I think there were probably ways that I could have kept my practice more vital. I always describe myself as keeping a toe in the arts, and I really think that's what it was. And I was doing things that weren't necessarily for me. Eventually, I wanted to work. I wanted more money to do more things in our family life. We were also paying off debt. And so I started working for Michael's, and I was teaching classes there. I was teaching homeschool classes. I was framing, and I learned a lot through those things. And then I took a class with Christy Duckworth to learn how to do mosaic work, and that became like a pivotal moment for me as well. And I can kind of draw a direct line from that to the work that I make now with beads.
Now, you were saying that you moved to Memphis and then you sort of started this group, this sort of homeschooling group. I mean, you mentioned earlier about having all the cousins and how, basically all the things that you do today are sort of in a way to sort of rekindle
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, good observation, Hamlet.
Well, I mean, you said it. Shoot, it's right out there. So you've got that, and then it's there, and then I mean, and you were talking about those other people who were sort of involved in the arts. When did you start to pay attention to the things that were happening in Memphis at that time, sort of in the mid-'90s, or early '90s, or rather late '90s?
Yeah. Well, we were, one of the things we did was take the kids to the museums, for sure. So we were like doing all the things that I didn't do when I was a kid. We were... anyone who would teach our homeschoolers a class, they took classes at Botanic Garden, Lichterman Nature Center, the museums, anything that we could find to supplement like what we were already doing. And you're right, it was very much, I was trying to recreate my cousin experience when I was a kid. And I think I did. We camped together. We did all these things. So as my youngest Ronnie was born in '98, and as he started getting older, that's when I started like doing outside employment for pay, like working at Michael's, teaching classes, things like that. And then I decided that, like Ronnie was our last kid, and I really wanted to learn more about the Memphis art scene. So I started, this was probably in the early, 2000s, I just started going to gallery openings. So I was going to David Lusk, Lisa Kurtz was a thing back then, Linda Ross, And I went for months. I felt like I was really shy. Like I felt like I had no knowledge about the art scene, and I was kind of intimidated. And I just went. And I didn't talk to anyone. And I think eventually someone, maybe at David Lusk, had noticed that I was there and started talking to me. And then various people at various galleries, I would say, yeah, I went to this show there, and they were like, oh, like what's going on there, at this other gallery, and I was like, don't you guys talk to each other? And they had no idea. It felt like to me that what was going on in the other spaces. They were kind of all these isolated entities doing these isolated things. And then that was sort of when I had always had a friendship relationship with Kiko, but when we were both starting families, we didn't see each other for a long time, but we wrote letters. In the olden days, I have a nice big stack of letters. Kiko did go to graduate school. Those letters are really interesting. And eventually he was coming through the U.S. and he said, I'm coming, I'm going to drive from Houston to New York. Can we come and stay with you in Memphis? And I was like, of course. And at that point, we had matching families. We each had 3 kids. They came. Everybody hit it off. It was great. He said, I'm having this show in Atlanta in a couple of months. Why don't you come? And I said, I'll come if you let me help. I really wanted to learn. He was way ahead of me in the arts world. And so I went, and that was the beginning of me managing his artwork in the U.S. It went really well. It was really great. And so he was showing there yearly. So we were seeing each other on a regular basis. So this was sort of happening at the same time that I was trying to learn about the Memphis art scene. We eventually got a relationship with Lisa Kurtz, and we both showed there. We were still there, when the gallery closed. And so, that was sort of my foot in the door. At that point, I was making mosaic work and incorporating that with glass, drawing on the glass, figure drawing, really abstract figure drawings. And so eventually I figured out, and I started talking to people. I started asking people to coffee. And I started doing this mosaic work that incorporated my kids' leftover toys. And my first solo show was at your gallery material. I should have looked up what year that was. I don't know. But that was a pivotal thing for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Sure. Well, hang on. So, okay, hang on. There were a lot of little things in there that I was going to touch on. So you were talking about how you started going to those galleries.
Right.
Now, just out of curiosity, what were some things that stuck out to you? I mean, here you are, you're kind of in this new town, you're going to these spaces, and you were talking to people and how they apparently didn't talk to one another at these other spaces. But talk about what are some things that you remember in terms of the kinds of work that was there, or were there things that sort of stuck out in your memory?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember Joel Parsons' show at Material had a big impact on me. Was
that the one when he was in India?
I think so.
Okay.
It was his first show there. Did he show there more than once?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was his first show.
He did a show there when he was in India, actually there in India.
Okay.
And Lauren just hung the work. And then Joel was there on Skype, I think, or whatever.
Okay, I don't think
then.
It was that show.
Okay.
I think it was maybe his second one.
Was that the one where he wrote "Thank You" all over the walls?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was it.
Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful and confusing. I also Terry Jones had a show at the Powerhouse that blew my mind.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think it was called Red, maybe, and she was doing all these things. I think that was another moment of realization for me, was my art education background is inadequate because I don't know what's going on. But I was so intrigued and confused, and I went to that show several times. She had a trough with melted wax in it. Yeah, and it had this wonderful smell, and I don't think I had ever really been exposed to installation work like this. And I remember meeting Terry, and she's so wonderful, and I was so starstruck. I was like, I felt like I couldn't talk to her because I was confused and admired her work so much. I wanted to figure out what was going on.
So, okay, I mean, to me, that's a really interesting place to be. So thinking about, you didn't understand it, but you knew you liked it.
Yeah.
What do you think it was about it that you liked? And I know this is like
Yeah.
dancing
I
about
know.
architecture.
Well,
but
I mean, the whole thing that it engaged just more than visual. Like this wax smelled. That art could be outside of the museum. She had a piece that was outside the door. That it was. That it could be, that art could be so many different things. The other thing that happened to me that was really instrumental was like being at the Powerhouse. There were pieces that were really challenging that, like, there was one, and I don't know who the artist was. It was like a pile of black-eyed peas. And I was like, I hate this. Like, why is there a pile of black-eyed peas in the middle of the floor? Like, I didn't get it. But it also drew me to like why? And I think the artist came and talked about this work, and then I was like, okay, there's like historical references here. I also helped to install a show that had these little tiny, maybe ceramic or plastic ears. There were like 1,000 of them that were installed in a corner. That, like, the idea was that it had 2 sets of matching ears that had to be like one pasted on either side that made this blob of these ears. And I remember thinking, like, this is horrible, wonderful. Like, why is this artist doing this? And because I was tasked with installing it, I was like really close. I was able to get like really close to the work and to talk to people about it. This is also where I met my friend Lester Merriweather. He was working there and I was volunteering, and we were like setting up little workshops. And then like I really got interested in Lester's art. Like, Lester's work had a huge influence on me. And at one point he was doing vanilla extract series where he was like taking magazines and cutting out like all the white faces, and then he was making these frames where you could see like both sides of the page. They were sticking out of the wall, and I asked him if I could help him, so I went to his studio and I helped him to make these frames and got really involved and was able to ask him questions. And Rahima Barber was there, and she wasn't there for long, but she introduced me to a lot of things. Another interesting thing that happened while I was here, one of my jobs that I had was working for a high-end caterer. And we served lunch in this office every day, which was where Elliot Perry worked. And Elliot was almost always the last person to come and have lunch. He usually came in when I was like starting to clean things up, and somehow we got talking about art. And he really helped me to learn more about like art by African Americans. And you might have curated the show of his work that was at Rhodes. Yeah, I went to that. That was a big deal for me. That introduced me to so many artists. And then Elliot started asking me to help him hang art in his house to help him move his collection around. And he would do this like every 6 months or a year. And I would go there. He would tell me about like his new work that he had purchased, and he would talk to me about the various artists that he was working with, like I've handled a Radcliffe Bailey. He had a Glenn Ligon, like the Negro Sunshine piece. I moved that several times. And I'm like, Elliot, I'm not bounded. You have insurance on this, right? And that was really, really formative for me. And I'm so grateful to him for introducing me to so many artists that, I don't know, I guess I might have figured it out after a while. But yeah, and the show that was at Rhodes with his work was a big deal for me too. So it sent me down different rabbit holes.
Now, don't forget, we're not in any hurry. Okay, so let's back up just a little bit.
Yeah,
so you were talking
back
about
up all you want.
You were talking about being there at the Powerhouse,
yeah,
and being challenged by this work, and then you were saying that you met Lester.
Yeah.
Now, had you seen Lester's work, or did you just meet Lester at the Powerhouse?
I'm not sure. I may have seen his work before. I think, yeah, I saw his work. I mean, I think I went to a show of Lester's before. There was that little room downstairs at the Powerhouse. I love that space. I'm still sad every time I go to the movies there. But he had these tape pieces where he was doing tape drawings, and that was a new concept to me. Like, I loved discovering drawings that were not like with charcoal or pencil, or like this thing that I was passionate about drawing that was done in this really out of the box way. And his work confused me at first too. So so I eventually learned that if I had like a really strong response to an artwork, that this is something that I should move towards instead of away from. And this is still something that like I try to be sensitive in myself to. Like if I have a really strong, like I really dislike this. Like, why do I dislike this? What is the challenge? Like, what's the hurdle for me here? And then some of these artists and these pieces end up becoming like some of my favorite work when I learn about them.
Now, thinking about that, was that always the case for you? I mean, in terms of, no.
No, I don't think so. My experience with Powerhouse, like that was a direct result. And I wasn't even there very long. It was like 6 months or something. I'd gone to shows there before. But, like Lester and I, when we get together, we still like mourn over the loss of that space. It was such a tragic loss here in Memphis. It was such an unfortunate thing. But I also watched how that energy didn't necessarily go away, right? The Powerhouse closed, and shows were scheduled, and Lester went to the University of Memphis and brought a lot of the people that were scheduled for the Powerhouse there. And like that helped me to understand how things work in the art world. Sometimes, how sometimes things can go away, but like buildings and places can change, but that the community and the people can persevere. I feel like the closing of the art college was a huge loss here in Memphis, right? But I also feel like, and there probably are some people that moved away because of that, but I still think that huge energy that was this ball of energy that was made by the Memphis College of Art is still burning really strongly here. And so, sometimes things close, and that was a dysfunctional organization in the end. It needed to probably go away. But other things have come of this. I'm happy that the Metal Museum is moving there. So I think watching what happened at the Powerhouse helped me to understand like how arts organizations evolve sometimes.
Now, what you were talking about Terry's show, what were some other shows that you remember as being really powerful and really good there?
Well, the Rashid Johnson work was there.
Now, what do you remember about that show?
He had a piece, actually Lester purchased it. He had like a big wax, giant I think it's 2 panels that are just enormous, that are covered with black wax, that have like little shelves on them, that have maybe candlesticks or something on them. And this was, I think this was like when he had the show there, that was when he was starting to get like he was on the verge of like skyrocketing.
If I remember right, that was right when, maybe right after the Rebels had bought a bunch of stuff. I mean,
something like, I think it was happening at the time, because I remember like listening in on a conversation maybe that he was having with somebody going like, this is happening right now.
And Lester got one of those pieces?
No, Elliot.
Elliot, okay.
Yeah, Elliot. And I think it's still hanging in his living room.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then, Glenn Ligon, the I Am a Man posters were there. There was a poster on the left that was the poster, and then the poster on the right, where he was commenting on it in pencil. And then to see like Negro Sunshine, like that was a completely new world to me. And it was wonderful because it really reignited my flame for art. Like this is something that's always been in me. And you get sidetracked sometimes, but these were things that really I'm grateful for, because they kept that alive and kept me like really interested in this evolving thing. It's endless. Like, you can always find new stuff to learn about.
I mean, if I remember right, part of the parameters for the Powerhouse was that the artists would come to Memphis, maybe like the show before or maybe a couple of shows before, because it was like a quarterly thing. Mm-hmm. And the artists would come to the space and then, I think in theory, sort of make a piece in response to the space or in response to the city. And if I remember right, with the Glenn Ligon show, there was downstairs one of the big America neon pieces that flashed, and then there was
the I Am a Man,
like a copy of maybe like a Richard Pryor album that he had recorded at Stax, I think.
That was upstairs.
And then those pieces that he made where he remade the Richard Pryor jokes using his like black oil bar technique.
Well, yeah, the text, all the text stuff, like the whole idea of text as art was new to me. I also just loved that space because, like, I think that the minimum intervention that they did to make it into an art space was that was a new idea to me as well. That I think was just beautiful. It was really wonderfully done. I remember when I first started volunteering there was like the storeroom downstairs, and Lester was showing me around, and there was this aluminum powder in there that had been used for some I don't know, some art something, and it was stored downstairs in this like really damp room, and it had like all these warnings on it. And I was like, I'm coming from this homeschooling background where you're taking care of the kids, and we're trying to set up like classes and stuff for kids. We were doing collage classes and things like that. And I'm like, Lester, I think this is really dangerous. It's okay. And I was like, I'm going to look this up. And it was like, it explodes with moisture. Like, it was this really, I was like, I'm really uncomfortable with this. Like, if we're bringing kids in here, we're going to have to deal with this. And I don't know what happened. I don't think it was, like, my time there was, 6 months. It was actually fairly short. And then, things like, I don't know what happened to that explosive aluminum. It didn't explode, obviously. But it was, like, the worst storage conditions for this crazy material.
I think that sort of sums it up. Now, but thinking about, you were there right at the end.
Yeah.
And that was when Rahima came from, God, where did Rahima, she was somewhere before? Maybe? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, but she came here, and if I remember right, she was only here for a short period of time, maybe like 8 months or something like that.
Yeah.
And then what do you remember about working with Rahima?
I loved Rahima.
Me too.
She taught me a lot of things too. And when I was running the artist residency, she was a panelist, which was really nice. And she was, I don't know, like, I also loved, like, intimately knowing this young African-American woman who was in charge. Like, I think that was, her being a woman, her being African-American. I don't think that I had been in those sort of circles before that moment. And it felt like really right, really empowering, slightly intimidating, but she was really nice to me. And, it was a great experience, And we don't chat that often. I should contact her, but I still consider her a dear friend. Yeah.
Now, what were some other things that you were seeing around town? I mean, the Powerhouse, of course, looms large in terms of its impact. Gosh, I was trying to think when the Powerhouse started. If I remember right, it was sort of around the time that Milla was born, and so it might have been around 2003 or somewhere in there. There
were the movie. What was the organization that was before Indie Memphis?
Oh, I don't know.
There was, because that was a part of the Powerhouse as well, that they were doing film screenings in the basement, which was like a really wonderful, weird place to watch movies.
Yeah, if I remember right, I mean, I think, I can't remember if I was on the board of Delta Access, but I remember that
Delta Access.
Les, oh my gosh, Les, who is a delightful man, Les Edwards, and his partner, Emily Trentham, yes, they were both really, really big movie buffs and into indie Memphis, and where I think like sort of like leaders there for a long time. And so there was a lot of Delta Axis, indie Memphis sort of dovetailing that was going on in there.
Yeah, I had like before I had that experience, like I had a lot of experiences organizing things, right? I was running breastfeeding classes. I was doing homeschooling things. I had founded this homeschool group. So like being at the powerhouse and just kind of observing like how the organizational part of it worked. You know, like I liked being sort of a fly on the wall, like being a volunteer who was taking orders, you know, and just sort of seeing like how things worked in the arts world, because I really had never experienced that before. And then at the same time having this gallery experience with Kiko, you know, going to Atlanta. We also worked art fairs. So I probably did, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7 art fairs with him in Miami, Houston, New York, you know, like, so those were all really interesting things to learn about the art world too. I remember going to martial arts, to a show at martial arts, and I think that was where I purchased my first ever piece of artwork. That it wasn't for me, it was for a gift. And it was a print, and I'm pretty sure, like I was purchasing it for, we were having in the homeschool group, like there was, you know, birthdays were a big thing, adults and kids, right? And so my friend Michelle, I was like, I'm gonna get a really good present, and I went to this art show, and there were these prints for sale, and I was like, she'll really like these. And I think Tracy Luritzen Wright may have sold them to me. Like, I don't know if she curated that show. I don't know what it was. I remember Amanda Sparks had a giant 3D book. That's not what you call them. What do you call them?
Pop-up book.
Pop-up book. Like a huge. Do you remember this?
I do.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing was, I mean, my story with this, and I can't honestly remember who did that show either, but I do remember going in there, and I do remember taking lots of pictures of it. And I showed that piece to people, to my students, for years.
Amazing.
Because it was such a great
artwork.
piece.
Yeah.
And then later, when I met Amanda, I was like, and somehow that book came up. She said that she had done it, and I was like, "Wait a minute,
Me too.
This book,
yeah, this exact experience. Like, oh, you're that person?
Because I think maybe she wasn't living here at the time.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Might have been when she was in school at Hunter,
maybe, or in Jackson. I'm not sure.
Oh, I can't remember.
Yeah, but I remember that whole show was really good. But that piece and then these prints that I bought really stuck out. Yeah, so, you know, I love being in a place like Memphis that I don't know, I feel like if you're in a place like New York, I mean, certainly there's got to be like these little cliques where you're intimate with the history. But I love the idea that, and maybe it wasn't Tracy, but I think it was Tracy that sold me this piece. And now, you know, like now I know Tracy, and she's, you know, works for Arts Memphis and is doing this amazing job. Like we all have this group history together that affects each other. And I feel grateful to be here in Memphis, like now. You know, there've been so many changes. I kind of felt when I was first exploring the art scene in Memphis, it felt like an old boys club to me. And I felt like there were not very many opportunities, and that people sort of didn't share them. They kept them close to themselves because there weren't that many opportunities. But if this changed, like since I started exploring the art scene here, I feel like it's been completely transformed. You know, I don't feel like it's an old boys club anymore. I think there's a lot of women in charge of things, you know, and I feel like it's a much friendlier place. A part of that is because there are more opportunities. I think that, you know, Arts Memphis, like changing their charter or whatever it was in order to give money directly to artists was a huge thing that was a pivotal thing that happened here in Memphis. And then I was really grateful to be involved with Crosstown Arts. You know, it was an accidental sort of meeting with Chris that enabled me to be involved with this organization and to be involved with starting and running the residency program. I had no experience in this, you know, and if it was in a place like New York, there would have been like 20 different people that had more experience at this job that would have been able to do this. You know, I'm grateful to be in this place here, where like you can sort of direct enter and be involved in, and there's so much grassroots things that happen here. And I love being a part of that. I'm grateful.
I love how you just like jumped right to the present moment. Okay, we're gonna go way back.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So
I know it's okay. We can go back and forth.
Oh,
I mean, it's related, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
all these things are, you know, there is a line
no,
between.
I'm with you. Now, so one of the things I'm also curious about that you touched on was that when you first got here, you felt like it was sort of like an old boys club or an old man's club, and so and I remember I did a session with Paula Kovarik,
Yeah.
and I remember she had not necessarily a similar experience. I mean, if I remember the way Paula talked about it originally was that, or the way she talked about it in my mind was that it was really kind of an age thing. That like, I mean, I'm sure it was also patriarchal,
Yeah.
but I think the way Paula was describing it to me was that, you know, like here she was coming in as an older person who had already had sort of a career and had done these things, and then they were coming in and it felt like it was a thing that was sort of dominated by the young or by the people who had been there since they were young.
Right. Yeah.
And so thinking about that, I mean, do you, when you were thinking about the sort of old boys club, I mean, to me in my mind, the way I remember you is that all of a sudden you were everywhere. It was just like everywhere I would go, there would be this lady, and you would always go around with Ronnie, if I remember right. And so, and you would come to the shows at Material, and you would be at shows at Martial Arts, and then you'd be at the shows all over the place. And it was just like, there's this person who's just suddenly here at everything.
Yeah, well, it was kind of funny because I feel like the lead up to that was really slow, right? And it was painful, you know, like trying to get like into this art scene, you know, and just it's funny, like I feel like I'm really outgoing, but at that moment I was very intimidated and shy, you know, because I didn't know the people, you know, I felt like I didn't know anything about art. Like my even though I had gone to art college, I hadn't been like doing it to what I felt seriously, even though looking back, that's a ridiculous thing to think, for a while. And I felt like I didn't know anything, right? Like I wasn't. And honestly, like talking to the galleries and realizing that they weren't communicating with each other maybe made me feel like, okay, like, I don't know, maybe I do know something that galleries should be communicating. Like you should be planning shows. Like you should have regular meetings so that you can support each other. You know, like I always want to do everything in a group because of all those cousins. So yeah, and I mean, I agree with Paula. It's funny because I didn't go to the Memphis College of Art, right? Like I didn't go there, but now that I am like an intimate part of the art scene, everyone thinks I went there. You know, like, and I'm honored.
It's the pink hair, Mary Jo. It's the
yeah,
pink
I
hair.
guess. Yeah, I'm honored. And so, like, I think I'm a person that doesn't do anything casually. So once, you know, it's like, all right, you know, you're gonna have kids. All right, you can't just have kids. You gotta breastfeed, and then you can't just breastfeed. You have to be an electing leader, and you can't just be an electing leader. You also have to like homeschool your kids, and then you can't just homeschool your kids. Like you got to found a homeschooling support group, you know. And this is just seems to be how I do things. Like it's never just one foot. So I think once I started getting a feeling of the art scene and going, then I was all in. I was all in, and it was also really motivating for me that, you know, like I was in charge of these little people that, you know, my kids, other people's kids, I wanted them to have like a well-rounded experience. And so, yeah, they came, you know, I always took my kids to all the things. Sometimes they were horrible. I remember one time I don't know how I started doing this. Jennifer Sargent was hanging some sort of show at the Memphis College of Art, and somehow I volunteered to help, and I had to take Ronnie with me. And Ronnie was at a very grumpy stage, and, you know, like I took all these supplies and things, you know, like to keep him busy and stuff. And he was just horrible and just demanding. And I could see Jennifer just like looking, rolling her eyes and looking sideways at him and everything. And I just kind of kept persevering and, did what I could anyway, and then took running away. Looking back, it's like, I tortured Jennifer and I tortured this poor child that really didn't want to be there. But.
Now, every once in a while when I do these interviews, I hear the voice of the listener in the back of my head. And so at some point you said you started managing Kiko.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wait, what?
Okay, so Kiko went to SFA with me, and then he went to Rutgers University. And then when he graduated from Rutgers, so his father is Bolivian and his mother is American, and he was sort of raised between the U.S. and Bolivia. He was born in Texas. He went to school in Bolivia for a while. He went to high school in Texas. Like, it was this really batting back and forth. And then after he graduated from Rutgers, he went to Bolivia to visit and just said, I feel at home here, and ended up staying, right? So then when he contacted me, we go to this show that he's doing in Atlanta at, now it used to be called Mason Mirror Gallery. Now it's just Mason. He's still with this gallery. They're amazing, Mason Gallery in Atlanta. And he started coming, and then it was like, well, can I store some of this work in your attic? Sure, yeah, you can do that, And then he was, can I ship this work to you? And then can you get it there? So it started to be where he started to pay me, to do these things. And then eventually it involved, he was showing more in the U.S. We were doing these big art fairs together, and he started calling me his manager. So I am his manager, the manager of his work in the U.S. And now we own a studio together, and Kiko's got 500 pieces of artwork there, and I'm shipping things. I'm if he's not here, I will stand in for him. I've written lots of stuff for different publications that he's done. He also has owned with other artists, like co-op galleries in Bolivia. I've showed there. So it's really been a mutually beneficial relationship, and we get along well enough and prioritize our relationship enough where we're being friends in business together, and it's successful. And so for a long period of time, I actually made more money because Kiko does large scale paintings that they sell. I don't know, like the gallery in Atlanta, they sell a lot of big artwork. That's their main thing. So he might have a $15,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 painting that he sells. So some years I would earn more commission from Kiko's work than I would earn from selling my own. Actually, last year, high five me please, it's the first year I made more from my own artwork than I did from Kiko's, and I'm really proud of that.
That is super exciting. Now, to me, the thing that's really interesting about that is, when you said I started to manage Kiko, my brain was like, I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense, because I would never do that. But then my brain was like, but Hamlet, you're not Mary Jo. You're not a helper. I really think there's this...
That's a basic part of my personality, yeah.
Or not just a helper, but it seems like you are looking for opportunities to help. If you're driving down the street and somebody has a flat tire and you pull over and you help them, you're not really a helper. You are, but you're not. But you go around looking for opportunities to help and facilitate and make things.
I think all of it goes back to, groups of cousins making drawings in the cabin, doing a little fashion magazine. Since I was I had these girl cousins. There were 5 of them. One of me, I was the oldest. I was a little bit in charge. When I was in high school, I got pegged as some sort of a leader. I was on student council. I was sent to some kind of leaders retreat. I never really thought of myself that way. I'm also a people pleaser, and I think this is a way that I make friends. And it is a way that I please people by helping them. It's probably a little bit of a survival mechanism from helping my mom. Since she had bipolar disorder, I had to mature quickly so that I could help with this. And, in a lot of ways, that's I don't know, kind of gross maybe. Like I was the parent in a lot of ways, right? And that's not always good for a kid. And I'd say that like it didn't work out so well for my brother, although we're just not the same. But for me, I was able to handle it. I matured quickly, and I gained all these skills that helped me as an adult. So I also feel like as a woman, I am rewarded for my caregiving more than for my art making. Like this has been a trend in my life. And so it's been a way for me to get into the art world. And since a year and a half ago, I left full-time employment to become a full-time artist. And so I'm really having to reprogram myself a little bit and put parameters around the helping part because I know that I have this strong, and I've always thought of it as part of my art practice, like working with the community. And when I was hired at Crosstown Arts, that was part of what I did. They actually hired me to run the flea market and with a promise of you'll be involved in the residency. And I kept my old job for like 6 months. Like, I don't know if this is going to work out. But
okay, hang on. So there were a couple of threads in there. One, okay. And this was an old thread, one that you mentioned a while ago. You said that you had worked with Lisa Kurtz, and I know that she was kind of a Memphis institution. Truth be told, I have no overlaps with her at all, and I think this might be the first time that she's come up.
Oh, interesting.
Will you talk a little bit about that gallery and your working and how that was? And
Lisa was a part. I mean, I wasn't there for this part of the history, and I hope I know it correctly. I think there was a woman named Alice. Bingham, yes. And I think that she and Lisa maybe had a gallery together or worked together. I think it was Bingham
Kurtz.
Okay, so they did have a gallery together, and I'm pretty sure that's where David Lusk got his chops, right? So I guess at some point they all did separate galleries. I don't know. Lisa, the gallery that I was involved in was on... What is that
There
street?
was one right there where there's an orthodontist now. And it's
it's
like
turned into a bank.
Mendenhall.
Yeah, I
no,
think it
not
was
Mendenhall. White Station.
White Station, yeah, that's where it was, and
Okay.
it was like a really beautiful space, and in the fashion that Mary Jo was doing at that moment, I was going to art openings at that time. Started talking to Keith Bumpus, who I love, really nice. He was really running the gallery at that point. Like Lisa was ill at the end of her life, and she was already ill, and it was more Kiko that sort of opened the door, and Kiko's opened a lot of doors for me, and then I sneak in and they go, oh, I guess we'll give Mary Jo a shot. Her work's not as good, but it's okay. It's getting better. And so, we worked up a relationship with Keith, and Kiko had several openings there. I don't think I never had my own show there, but I had work there. And after a few years, the gallery closed, Lisa died. And one thing that I did, which was really smart, is that I had been doing a lot of reading about art business, and I had written up a contract. So Kiko and I had a contract that stated that we owned the artwork and that it was on loan to Lisa Kurtz Gallery. When Lisa died, she left a lot of debt. And so the debt collectors were coming after the gallery, and the courts don't necessarily know how the art world worked. And so they wanted to sell all of that work to pay Lisa's debts. And I don't know about the other artists that she was representing at that time. A couple of them called me, what do I do? And I'm like, I don't know. But I had this piece of paper that said we own the artwork, and I got a big moving van, and as quickly as I could, I went over there and picked it up. So I was able to get our artwork back, and I don't know what happened to any of the other artists that were represented there.
Now, you were talking about the gallery being really nice. I do remember it being very swank. Yeah. And, of course, anything east of Highland was very swank. And so what kind of programming did she have? Because I think, if I remember right, I knew a guy, I knew a guy named Barry Buxbaum, who was a classmate of mine at the University of Memphis, and then I think was working there in one of those iterations of the Kurtz Bingham time, but I don't necessarily remember the kind of work that was in there. Do you remember?
I mean, I remember, I think Kiko's work was like the perfect fit. He was doing large abstract paintings. And, you know, like it was like a natural something. I mean, I think, you know, towards the end, she was ill and her business relationships began to deteriorate. And I think she was running off a lot of artists. You know, and Keith was great. Like he was just amazing to work with. And he did the best he could to facilitate things, and he kept things beautiful and clean, and you know, was really good at like hanging the work. And he put on really great openings. But it was a lot of like large abstract paintings and expensive. Like the work there that she was selling was $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. You know, so Kiko's work sort of fit in that price range. Mine, I don't think did. You know, my work was a dime a dozen. Still is in some ways. It's where I am. It's okay.
And so, okay, so let's see. Where
yeah, I can't. I don't even remember really. I go to all the openings there, but I don't have a good sense of, except for like abstract painting, what else might have been showing there.
And I mean, one of the things I like about the way you were talking about the city, I mean, you touched on a lot of the different galleries and a lot of the different things that were happening. I mean, to me, like I was saying, you know, like suddenly you were everywhere, but I guess that you were saying, that was sort of a slow process. But
it's like a house, right? It's like it takes forever to get started, and then like, bam. So maybe that's really interesting to hear your perspective of mine emerging into the Memphis art scene. I love this.
But I mean, also, Mary Jo, I'm one of those people where people are like, I'll introduce myself and they're like, I've met you 8 times. And I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay.
So
I mean, you've always been a wonderful staple here, and I learned a lot from you in the beginning. I loved seeing you at all the places too. Like you're that person as well.
Oh,
that's
thanks.
Everywhere all the time.
It's hard for me to take a compliment. Thank you, Mary Jo.
That was good.
So let's see. So now, one thing I'm curious about, you mentioned a couple of times Crosstown, and then that sort of connection there. And then, hang on, let me just double check. Okay, we're doing good. We got about 20 minutes.
Okay,
you doing okay?
Yep.
Okay. And so you mentioned Crosstown. And so how was it that you came to be connected to Crosstown? You said it was through the flea market.
Sort of. Well, that was, I think I had, you know, there was a lot of buzz about this thing, right? That was happening. You know how it was in the beginning. Chris Miner and Todd Richardson were going to go and, you know, revamp this building and make it into this huge art space. And I was really interested in this project. And at that time, like, Chris was giving his phone number to everyone he met. Right? Do you remember this? Like, he would just like, yeah, call me anytime. And I did. Like, at that moment, I was like asking people for coffee, you know, like that was what I was doing. And I was like, I told him, I said, I have a really good idea for fundraising for for this project that you're doing. Like, can we have lunch? So we went to Maori restaurant on Quince. That's still my favorite Indian restaurant in town. And I don't know, like it was, I mean, I don't know. I thought it was an original idea. It probably wasn't. It was like an art CSA. Like they weren't happening at that moment. And he was really polite, and he listened to all this and listened to me talk. I don't really think he was interested in that at all, but I think he liked me. And then when things started to get moving, you know, like, I don't know, I guess we had probably met a couple of times or whatever, you know, we would see each other at the things that were happening. And, you know, he wanted to hire me. And then he said, what I want you to do is come in and help to run the flea market, the Cleveland Street Flea Market, which was on the corner. You know, the original Crosstown Arts was like in the basement, sort of under, right? Under the flea market. That's where the first events happened, and I went to those. And I was working for Paige Robbins out in Collierville. It's an adult daycare center for people with dementia and Alzheimer's. And it was a part-time position. I loved doing it. It was, you know, I don't know. It was making art with these vulnerable groups that were also wonderfully enthusiastic, and I loved listening to their stories, and I loved the guy that glued googly eyes onto his glasses one time. And, it was a really great job that I loved. And they were sort of wanting me to do more. And then this opportunity came up with Chris, and I was like, what direction do I want to go? Like, what am I excited about? And I knew that I really wanted to, more than anything, like be an artist. I didn't necessarily want to teach. I've always sort of taught, but never like in a university setting. I remember when I was in college looking at like my favorite instructor was always in trouble for various things. And I was like, okay, if I decide to go into teaching, this is going to be my life, is to just be in trouble all the time. So I made a conscious decision that I was not going to teach at the university. But I ended up teaching a lot of different ways, and actually ways that were probably a little more true to my community spirit. Mm-hmm. So when he asked me to work at the flea market, the idea was to bring this, they bought the business, not the building, was to work with this community to clean it up, to start doing like community-oriented workshops in there. And then they were building the, oh God, I can't remember. Story Booth,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which was this amazing project. And, I wanted to be involved with all this. So I was running the flea market on weekends, working at Page Robbins during the week, and eventually I decided that Crosstown Arts was going to happen and that I wanted to go this direction. So I was doing things like, first we helped to clean up the flea market and do advertising. This was Amanda Sparks and I. She was the manager and I was the assistant manager. And we were, I don't know, like I think back on that and I think I was just a white lady going in there telling people what to do without any experience. I learned a lot from the folks there. I think that I did help them, but there was probably also some harm in that, which I regret. We did keep the flea market going for a long time. I had good relationships with the vendors, and I still see them around town. So I'm grateful that I wasn't just a horrible person.
But now, I mean, just to back up a little bit, I love that thing that you said about how Christopher Miner was just handing out phone numbers. I feel like that is going to become a reoccurring tag because I know Brittany Boyd Bullock. I feel like Brittany met Chris Miner when she was working the front desk at the Kroc Center with like the babysitting thing, and he brought Charlie in. I think that was it, and it was that kind of thing, like where people would just sort of like bump into Chris Miner, and then that led to this, and that led to that.
I think Chris was looking for nice people, and I think I came off as a nice person. I think that's how I got this job at Crosstown Arts. And so, like I was doing some things with Story Booth, running workshops in there.
Now, this is the first time, maybe it's the second time, because I think Brittany did some work at Story Booth.
Yes, she did.
Some point. But will you talk to me a little bit about Story Booth? I want to make sure that I get that story right in terms of thinking about how it fits in here.
Nat Aitken started that, right? He's a writer. And, the idea was that it was going to be like this secret space that kids could go to learn things like that were writing, that were creative. And I love this idea. And we had to basically kind of move the whole flea market around and move people's booths. We reduced the number of booths. Like that was part of my task, was to rebuild this flea market in a smaller fashion. And I was really proud of this moment. I remember like people were discussing what we could do and how much space the Story Booth was going to take up, and they were changing the configuration and building these booths for the flea markets. And I was like, this is not going to work. Like I had a sense. I'm very math challenged, so I went to the flea market and did all these measurements in there, and I got a piece of graph paper, and I drew everything out. That like we can't do that, but we can do this. And damn it, if I wasn't right, I was really proud that I figured this thing out. So they moved the booths, built Story Booth, and it was like a secret bookshelf. It just looked like a bookshelf that was actually a door that you could pass through. And, there were workshops and there were after-school programs there. I remember that's sort of how I got into using postcards in my own work. There was a vendor that had postcards in the flea market, and I did an altered postcard workshop where people could come in. They would come in. We would sit at the flea market tables and tape and glue things onto postcards. And then we did a little miniature show in one of the empty flea market booths. We were doing things like that. We were hosting some art shows in a corner. So I was starting to do like a little bit of curating. And it was wonderful. It was crazy. And the other nice thing was that the weird office that they had in the flea market, it was in this big plate glass window, and it was like raised up, but it looked towards the building. So, and I happened to just love construction equipment. So I had like the ringside seat for the second largest crane in the U.S. that they brought to the building to pick up the giant windows that eventually went on the top. So, it was like candy for me to be there and be able to watch this thing happening. And to be involved in any way, the beginning of this was very community oriented, and I really related to that. And that's where I met Brittany Boyd Bullock, who I'm a huge fan and admirer of Brittany's. I'm so grateful to be in an art world that has Brittany in it, right? Yeah, and so we worked together for a while. I can't remember exactly what her role was.
So, here's the part where I would insert, go to episode 4 or whatever.
I know. Have you interviewed Brittany yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, she has got the most amazing sort of circuitous path story. It's so good. But if I remember right, the flea market there also played a huge part in her practice. If I remember right, there was a vendor there that had these ancient ebony magazines, and she just got a ton of them, and has used those as collage fodder for years and years and years.
The loss of that flea market is a big loss, I think. Yeah. I also loved, I curated some shows. There was the Crosstown Arts had the 2 galleries, right? The main gallery that was in the office that was curated by the organization, and then the 430 gallery, which was available to anyone in the community to put something on. And I did a couple of shows called Belongings, where you had to either purchase or be inspired by something in the flea market, and everything hung. And I loved doing that. There was Belongings 1, and then Belongings 2 Repurposed was the other one. And those were really fun shows to curate.
Now, were those, you had done the work with Geeko before, but were these the first times that you would organize shows? Or I don't think so. I think the first time that I organized shows was after, so I was in my 40s before I had a studio outside my house, right? So, and I went to the Razo Warehouse that's owned by Mark Nowell, who's really wonderful. And it's in Cooper Young. It's like an old train depot. Mark had a big section, has a big section. And then there's like a nice sized common area. And I think it was 4 small, they were like office spaces that were gallery. And I had one of those. I had it after Mary Long, which was really wonderful because there's lots of wax on the floor. And so at that point, that was when I was trying to get to know the Memphis art scene, and I decided to curate some shows in that space, but I didn't really know anyone. And I said to myself, I'm just going to be really brave and invite someone I don't know very well. And then I'm going to ask them to do the same thing until we get up to whatever it was, 10 or 12 people. And so I curated this show called Unchained. And let's see, Michael Andrews was in the first one. I'm still friends with him. Megan. And if I remember right, was that when Michael and Alice were also in the basement of that building?
Yes, yeah, they were, and it was so funny because like I didn't invite Michael, someone else invited him, and it was like the day that the show was supposed to go up, and I'm contacting him. He still hadn't brought the work, and he was like he like got in his pickup truck, and it was a giant woodcut, and like pulled up and installed this piece just as the show was opening, and I was like okay, but I liked like this gave me a taste for like uncurating. I like this idea of being a curator that lets go of the process, and this is something that I continue to do as well with the Front Porch Window Gallery at the Studiohouse on Malvern, where I am. And it was a wonderful way for me to get to know the art community. Like Michael later called me up and said, "Come and do this steamroller printing," and I was like, I'm not a printer. Like, what are you talking about? I can't do that. And he like badgered me into it, like, I'll help you. Which, I ended up doing 4 or 5 different, and we're trying to get another one going. I hope it happens. That was a really formative thing for me. And it was really wonderful to get to know the community that way. So I highly recommend that artists curate in some way. Like, you have to do it.
Well, now, how did you even find Mark Nell in the Roselle space? How was that on your radar? Because it's sort of like a little nook.
I think I had been to a show there before. There was a sketchbook show, and I had been in the sketchbook show there. I don't even remember who organized that. I think that was probably my first introduction to it. I really wanted to be in the Medicine Factory. I had been to shows there. Maisie Craddock, I'm a huge fan of Maisie Craddock. I love her and I love her work. And they didn't have any openings, so I looked at different things. I looked at Art Factory, and I contacted Mark, and he happened to have an opening, and the price was great. And so I took it, and it was a 30-minute drive for me. I was still living in the suburbs.
I mean, for me, one of the things that's really great about having a studio in a building with other artists is the other artists. Who else was down there at the time? Or was that was there a sense of community there at Roselle?
There was with Mark, for sure, and some people. Brian Pera, I think he moved in after I did. I think there may have been some more empty spaces. I can't remember exactly who was there when I first was in there. But, Mark was just he has such a wealth of information I learned a lot about the history of the Memphis art scene from Mark. And he's such a great talker, and he's been involved in so many wonderful, crazy things. And he was just so supportive and said, of course you can have a show here. And yes, would you please run the Instagram account? And, so I learned a lot from that space, and it was really great to be there. Kiko worked with me there sometimes. And I did 2 Unchained shows. I can't remember if I did one of my own work.
Now, who else was in those shows?
Megan Visiri, Cedar Norca was in one of them. There was a writer. Somebody chose a writer. What's his name? Flannery, his last name? Do you know him? Mick, maybe? I can't remember. I see him. I didn't know his name. I see him in the concourse building a lot. We always say hi. But he had never done an art show before, but I was game.
Oh, Mike Flanagan.
Yes.
I do know him. He walks his dog in front of my house.
Okay, yeah. And so he was somebody that was selected to be in this uncurated thing that had never done an art show before, and he did this crazy installation, and I worked with him, and I loved that. It was really fun for me to work with people, whether they had an art background or not, to put something together. And these were, really well received. Terry Phillips, I think it was, I can't remember if she was in one of the Unchained shows or if she had a show there. I can't remember. I love Terry, and I love her work. She's been a big influence on me as well. So that was super formative. And now I have the Front Porch Window Gallery at the Studiohouse on Malvern, and that I started during the pandemic. The Urban Art Commission had this mini grant where for $500, the idea during the pandemic was to do some sort of art thing that people wouldn't have to be in the room together. So I built a small box on a window on the front porch, and then my idea was I would continue this when I got into the studio. The plan was to do like 4 shows a year, but once I got going and once I decided that like I was going to focus on my own practice, I was like, I think this is going to happen once a year. But the idea is still, I did the first show, and then I chose Yangbin Park. He's a university professor at the University of Memphis, and he's a printmaker, and I didn't know him well, but we're friends now. He forked off. He chose, I think, Joanna Moscoso, who I know very well, but she took a while to respond, so then he invited, I don't know if it was Maritza Davila or Emma Self, who's the artist that's showing there right now. And then we had Maritza. Like, the order has gotten a little. So the last person out of that original chain needs to be Joanna Moscoso, who I'm hoping that she'll show next year in the Front Porch Window Gallery. And then I'll see if I want to continue that. I don't know. How are we doing on time?
That was actually the alarm, and so that was kind of a perfect place to pause. Okay, so next time, more Crosstown.
Okay.
More of your work, Studiohouse on Malvern, and anything else that I pick up on as I re-listen to it. Thank you for hanging out
This
with
was
me.
fun.
And that was the first of 2 interviews that we recorded with Mary Jo Karimnia. The interview that you just listened to was recorded on May 2nd, 2025. Please join us next week when we will have the second interview with Mary Jo. Until then, thank you for listening.